Well, good morning. My name is Steve Peck. I am the proud chair of the Douglas County Republican Party, and we have an exciting guest here with us this morning, Deb Flora, who may need no introduction with some of our fellow Republicans. Deb Flora is a former Miss Colorado and a runner-up to Miss USA. She was also a filmmaker for Whose Children Are They? And a radio host, daily radio host for 710 KNUS every day from 3 to 4. And I have the privilege of sitting down and talking with her about a recent trip she took to the border. So I heard her speak the other day, and I thought, you know what? I want other people to know what she's sharing. It was a good crowd that we had there that day, but I want to share it with a broader audience so you can tell what you learned down there at the border. And so what was the motivation to go down there, and what was your first observations?
Absolutely. Great question, Stephen. And it's an honor to be here with my family, with the DC GOP. Love being in Douglas County and appreciate your leadership. We went down to the border because, as we know, the mainstream media does not tell us the truth. My goal really, and pretty much everything I do, is to drag the truth into the light, to empower citizens to take a stand. That's why we made the documentary, Whose Children Are They? That's why I do the radio show. And we went down to the border because, as we all know, when Joe Biden made his first visit 2 years into his presidency with this ongoing crisis, he showed up to a very sanitized situation. And I'll share that in a moment. But we decided we needed to go down there. Colorado is a border state. I mean, every state really is. But Colorado is uniquely positioned where drugs, human smuggling, human trafficking goes straight up I-25 and straight out I-70 to the rest of Colorado and the rest of the country. And as we know, Colorado is number one in car thefts, bank robbery, huge fentanyl crisis that is going on. And there are 3 drug cartels operating pretty much with impunity in Colorado right now. Part of that is, while Jared Polis and some of the Democrats may deny it, Colorado is a sanctuary state, particularly because of a law that was passed in 2019 that prohibits local and state law enforcement from coordinating with federal law enforcement. So what that means is we are less safe. The people who are being trafficked up here do not have the ability to be rescued, which is what ICE and Border Patrol and DEA tends to do primarily. And then the drug cartel operates with impunity. So we did go down and we recorded, we broadcast live for an entire week. We're working on an hour special right now, a video, which we cannot wait for people to see. You have to see it firsthand. But one last answer to your question, what was my first impression? When we went down there and we saw the border wall in El Paso, we also went to Deming, New Mexico, and further into New Mexico as well. That border wall that people, talk about as some monstrosity, it is actually very effective. It is not an eyesore in any way. But what I noticed more than anything, Stephen, is that wall did not just separate 2 countries, which it does. A sovereign nation, as Reagan said, a nation that cannot control its borders is not a nation. That's a definition of a sovereign nation. But it separated 2 worldviews. On our side, even the poorest area in El Paso was a mansion compared to what we saw in Juarez, Mexico, which is one of the murder capitals of the world. And the biggest difference between what's going on south of the border and on our side is a different view of the value of life, a different worldview. On our side, America is founded on the idea that every single individual has intrinsic value and therefore rights. On the other side, they look at life so cheaply. The drug cartel actually call their coyotes chicken herders, and they call their human cargo chickens. That's why we have to protect our border, to protect the way of life and the worldview that we have here in America.
Wow. It sounds like it was a wild trip. How long were you down there?
We were down there for about 5 days. And speaking of wild trip, my husband, who many people know, Jonathan, 82nd Airborne veteran, and we have our film company together, former Disney director, producer. He, when I talked to him about going down, he goes, "You can go down under one condition, that I go and I have your 6. So he did, because we were told that the moment we landed, the drug cartel knew we were there. We were not allowed to go over to the other side of the wall, which is wise. We shouldn't have anyway, as we've seen by, not long afterwards, there were U.S. citizens who went to the other side near Brownsville and were immediately murdered in a drug cartel shootout. So it was wild and woolly, but we were with some really good
One
folks.
of the things that we hear from the corporate media is that this is an issue of compassion, that if Americans were only compassionate, then we would just let people come over as if there was no border and we were all one nation. I mean, how would you describe, or what would your response be to somebody who said, you're just, Deborah, you're just being a little narrow-minded about this, and if you would only open your heart and see, that this is, they're just looking to pay their bills and opportunity. I mean, this country is a nation of immigrants, and and I mean, aren't you being kind of unwelcoming?
Great question, Stephen, because that is why people back things like a sanctuary status. We need to speak to our fellow Coloradans and our fellow Americans and let them know this. We are all compassionate as far as people wanting to come here for the right reasons. But sanctuary status and these kind of laws actually harm the very people they purport to help. One of my most moving interviews that I experienced that you all will be able to see on camera as well was with a woman named Nicole Roulet, who works at the rescue mission of El Paso. And she shared the story of those who want to come here for the right reason and what happens with the porous border. With the porous border, the drug cartel exploits that. It lies to those who are trying to come here for the right reasons, uses, abuses, leaves them in the desert. We heard about horrific things such as the rape trees, children being abandoned, all sorts of things that are terrible. When we do what a sovereign nation should do, which is secure our border and the way of life that people are trying to come and enjoy, then we can process people who are coming here for the right reasons through the ports of entry. And yes, I'm for everything, all of the above. Let's secure the border, have the wall, empower the Border Patrol to be more than just processors, which is what's happening with this surge, but actually patrol our border. Then let's reinstate a workers permit program, for instance, where people are on the other side of the border. They want to come here to work and support their families. They're matched up with an employer, and then they go back again. They want to go back and forth, but they can't because of the drug cartel. And the women and children that most people imagine when they think of a sanctuary status are the most abused by the drug cartels. One story I heard, Stephen, a mom and her 3-year-old child were strapped to the top of a train by the drug cartel. They were not allowed to come off for 3 days. The mom thought her child had died several times and kept resuscitating the child. That's how they are treated. The first humane face they see are Border Patrol agents, ICE agents who give them their first food, give them medicine and all of that. The other thing, Stephen, that is really important for people to know, right now, 80 to 90% of the people coming across our border are single adult males. Very few now are coming from Mexico. Some are coming from Venezuela, who, by the way, are fleeing socialism. Let's be really clear what socialism does. They are in a world of hurt, but socialism destroyed their country. Most of whom are coming over right now. We were hearing stories of people from Russia, Chinese nationals, even foreign military operatives from China. Everyone from what the Border Patrol off the record would call the stands, as Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, terrorists coming across our border. And we need to know what's really happening, protect the citizens of this country, secure the border, and then create a safe way for those who want to come here for the right reasons. It's not happening right now.
One of the things that you said when I heard you speak last week, we were talking about the definition of asylum. You want to touch on that, because I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, we heard this from the Border Patrol agents. So the reality is asylum is defined internationally and nationally as if someone is fleeing a country where they're going to be persecuted either for their faith, for their political viewpoint, or for some other reason, perhaps even lifestyle. When they are fleeing for those 3 reasons, not just economic hardship, because really the goal would be for everyone to export the ideas of America and make their own countries better and more free. But if they are truly seeking asylum, then the first border they cross is where their asylum should be. So when you have people coming from China crossing all the way up through all of those borders, that is not asylum. Their first step of asylum would be perhaps in Brazil or somewhere along the line. Yes, maybe not as great as America, but the goal of asylum is not for everyone to come to America. It is for them to go to a safe place. So when those crossing our border illegally, they've been trained by the drug cartels to say, I'm seeking asylum. They do that. They actually seek out the Border Patrol now because they believe with what Joe Biden has said. One of his first things he said in office is, we're wide open. Come on in. We're open for business. So they're lied to. And what's even worse, by the way, the compassion aspect of it, these people are coming here for the right reasons, which, are not the majority, but they're there. They're lied to until there are jobs waiting for them. There's all these benefits waiting for them. And then they arrive with not a dime to their name, and there are no jobs for them here. This is not humane, and it is not the definition of asylum.
Yeah. Did you, while you were down there, it sounds like you had a chance to talk to border security. Was it, do you have what was the setting? And was it one or two agents? Was it a room full of them? Did they brief you? Did you have off conversations? Like, what did that look like?
Great question. So it's funny because we were supposed to have a ride along with the Border Patrol, and they had just given a ride along to LA Times and CNN. Yeah. And then we get a report back that, because we're with Salem Media, that's known to be conservative with Dennis Prager and Hugh Hewitt and our great, station here in Colorado, that we were denied a ride along. But the Border Patrol so wanted to talk with us, they reached out to their union representative who can speak about anything. So we had off the record conversations with Border Patrol. We had an on the record conversation with someone who was their representative. But here's what people need to know about the Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas. The Border Patrol, their morale is so low right now because Mayorkas, when he came in, he vowed to prosecute 100% of the assaults on Border Patrol. He's prosecuted 2%. In addition, he changed the rules of engagement like we did to our military, which was under Obama, which was absolutely criminal. Right now, starting in January of this year, the Border Patrol, if they chase someone who is who is a drug cartel or a coyote, and that person gets hurt, let's say they even break their leg or something like that, or they are killed by the Border Patrol doing their job, the Border Patrol will then be held responsible for the harm of a criminal they are paid for and hired by our country to stand against. So the Border Patrol is very, very demoralized after Whipgate, which was a trumped up lie. Everyone knew what happened. Yeah, what happened in Del Rio, Texas. Even the photographer said, no, that's not what's happening. Mayorkas perpetuated that lie. Biden perpetuated that lie. So we have got to retake the White House in 24, send people to DC who will stand up for the sovereignty of our nation and reinforce the Border Patrol. Right now with the influx, all they do is process people all day long. They're not even allowed to really patrol our border anymore.
It's disturbing. And one of the things I see in this debt ceiling debate is, I'll see different social media feeds about the president. It's really not the president, it's his handlers saying, look, we have to raise the debt ceiling with no conditions attached to it because we've got to hire and pay for new Border Patrol agents. My question is, what the hell is the point of having Border Patrol agents if they're not allowed to do their job?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, that's what really is going on. It's the policies, and the policies matter. We've got great people serving on the border. One of the things we also need to do, by the way, Alan West is a good friend of ours, Colonel Alan West, who was a Florida congressman and Texas GOP chair. He and several others, including the DEA agents, the ICE agents, the Border Patrol we spoke to off the record, said it is time that we treat the drug cartel as they are. They are a narco-terrorist organization. They are a military organization that is operating and controlling our southern border. It's time that we also allow our military to be a part of this, not to overtax them either. But one of the most secure areas on our border is in El Paso because Texas Governor Greg Abbott sent the Texas National Guard down there to reinforce the border. This is an invasion. It is important for us to understand that. And by the way, when it comes to the fentanyl crisis, China is providing all the precursors for fentanyl to the drug cartel because they know that it destabilized our country. They learned from the opium wars with Britain, who destabilized China, I think it was in the 1800s, by sending opium in. This is what's going on. All of this is by design to destabilize our country, to invade it with all kinds of people that we don't know. But because, by the way, the drug cartel makes a lot more money with their high value targets, such as those from Afghanistan, those from Russia, those from China. And that's what's going on. So yes, we need to treat it like what it is. Narco-terrorist military organizations, or transnational, as they call them, military organizations, are abusing our border and harming our citizens.
It does seem to me this is unlike immigration waves that we have had in the past. Even from Mexico 20 years ago, this is different. So, I mean, people will cite, Ellis Island. They'll talk about the Irish and the Italians and the Germans coming here at different points in our history, all of which is true. That's absolutely true. And yes, we do take asylum citizens from other countries. But what it does seem to me is that China's waging an asymmetrical warfare against us, and most citizens seem oblivious to this. These are not. This is all by design, and I think their approach, from my view, is multifaceted, and sending over people across this border who have malintent is just one element. It's just one of the facets.
Yes, it is. I mean, if you saw another national power as your enemy, as China does to us, they think in dynasties, they think in thousands of years. And we are leaving our border open to those who wish us harm. Very simple strategy. Start sending fentanyl to devastate our cities and our states and our countries. Start sending your agents and operatives over, which is what is going on. Just last week, 30 Chinese nationals were apprehended in the Del Rio Valley, or in the Rio Grande Valley, just wandering along. Now, while they were captured, one Border Patrol told me that only about 20% of those coming over our border are apprehended. So let's think about who's in our country now. That is why it is imperative for us to retake the White House, the Senate, and keep sending people to DC who understand we are a sovereign nation that is under attack. And then we can look at the ways for those who want to come here and enrich our country and deserve asylum to come here. We're all for that. I want to share one other detail with you, Stephen, because as we work to persuade our neighbors, which is what we have to do, this freedom movement, this security movement will only grow through addition, not attrition. I just learned a very startling statistic yesterday. Last year, 130,000 unaccompanied minors were being held by U.S. Border Patrol. And that just shows that we're being held. But what is this administration doing differently? And this is why Susan Rice resigned. A lot of people were like, what just happened there? She resigned because instead of they didn't want any photos of unaccompanied minors being held at the border. Now, that was a humane thing because they held them under the last administration until they identified someone who was truly a relation or some kind of contact that cared about them.
You're talking about the kids, kids in cages.
And they weren't. They weren't in cages. We saw they were just areas that were separated by chain link fences. So there were certain areas. But here's what this administration did. 130,000 minors, a Border Patrol agent confirmed this off the record in tears, were basically, they were dealt with so quickly that they just basically gave them to anyone who came along. No verification of who these people were. And the Border Patrol agent broke down in tears and said, I think the vast majority are now in sex trafficking, human trafficking, and slavery. They don't even know where they are in the country. That's criminal. And those who care about compassion need to understand that's why Susan Rice resigned. And there are a few whistleblowers under her who made that clear. Humane policies are compassionate, conservative policies. That's what we need to tell our neighbors.
So those kids in cages, I mean, it's an easy thing to parrot and pass along as if, can you believe this Republican administration is putting these children in cages like they're Humane Society shelter animals or something like that, when in fact It was really to make sure that they were going to the appropriate people.
Exactly, exactly. There was a very long process through which they would identify who these kids really belonged with, how they then processed them, and they sped that up so quickly that all of these people who are, let's just call them evil, thought, well, look, there are all these children on the border now, and they're just letting them go. Some of them are probably used now to transport drugs. They're used for all sorts of things that is just really tragic. It's time for us to get our compassionate and moral outrage going to protect those coming across our border.
Can you speak to the border wall itself? I mean, I know
Yes.
we've talked about it. We've been talking about it for 20, 25 years. And I know there have been different efforts at different times, different parts of the border. So I sense, I've never been there myself, that there's a patchwork of different walls and there's still open spaces. I mean, one, I guess the first question is, how much of the border is actually covered by a wall? Two, do you believe in your assessment, is the wall a deterrent? Does it work? Because some people say, oh, they can just tunnel under. They can put a ladder over. They'll, you build it higher, they'll get a taller ladder. I mean, this is silly, right?
Yeah.
Or is it?
It's a great question. When we release that 1 hour special, you're going to see a very interesting image. I interview a woman named Irene Armendariz Jackson, who's with the Border Security Coalition. Her husband is former Border Security and Border Patrol. There's an area right in El Paso where you see two walls. One's, a certain height, the other one's much higher. And she said, let me tell you about this tale of two walls. The one that is shorter is not racist. The one that is higher is called racist. And here's the irony and the hypocrisy. The shorter wall, I believe, was built in approximately 2008 under the introduction of a Democrat politician in El Paso. It was called Operation Hold the Line, to stop the crime that was plaguing El Paso. And when that wall was built, and it did help stop the crime, it was approved by Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and an entire slew of Democrats that voted for that wall. The Trump wall, as they call it, is simply higher. And then they build it to secure the border even further. And it is somehow called racist, but this one isn't. There's a wonderful woman I interviewed, Dolores Chacon, and you've got to see this image of her backyard. And her family has been in this home since for well over 100 years, from Chihuahua. It's called Chihuahuita. It's the oldest borough in El Paso. And she said before the wall went up, she couldn't even take her daughter to school because there'd be drug cartel, there'd be criminals all over her yard, on her roof. And when the wall went up, she calls it her freedom fence, because she said, I got my freedom back. Now, to your question of does it work? Yes, it does. Where it is in place, if the Border Patrol is actually allowed to patrol the border, what the wall does is make it harder for those to cross it. Then they have an entire series of other things. They've got sensors, they've got drones, they've got sensors in the ground, they've got all this different other surveillance equipment. And then they've got usually Border Patrol on horses and ATVs, where they can immediately go when they hear someone's crossing in an area over the wall. That's why it works. As far as how far it is, it was all the way from El Paso through Deming, New Mexico, and I believe most of the way through Mexico. But that's why areas like Brownsville are absolutely being terrorized, because there's not a wall there, and people just come across into people's property in the middle of the night, and they are afraid to come out because it's usually the drug cartel trafficking people and drugs. So the wall works. It is humane, because then the people that want to come here for the right reason go through the ports of entry, where the Border Patrol and ICE are incredibly humane and kind. So that's the story of the wall, and we need to push back on the hypocrisy.
Did you have a chance to talk to any of the locals? I hear you said that you talked to the Border Patrol, and you mentioned this lady about her freedom fence. I mean, do you get the sense that the locals are exasperated that the rest of the country doesn't hear that there's a problem? Do you think that they're sensing like, hey, this has been a problem for us for 20, 30 years. Now it's knocking on your doorstep, yes, Denver, because Governor Abbott, the governor of Texas, is busing these folks around the country, including to Denver, which is a sanctuary, yes, city. And frankly, I mean, if you're not going to secure the border, if I'm Governor Abbott, I'd be thinking the same thing. I mean, I don't hold that against him.
Yeah. Here's the biggest travesty and why we went down there. Those who are local, even Democrats I spoke to that have been there fighting this, living this for decades. And by the way, though, much worse under this administration. One real quick statistic: in the final year of the Trump administration, illegal immigrants that were apprehended were a little over 400,000. We're on track this year to be 2.6 million or more. So when Karine Jean-Pierre, just in 2023, when Karine Jean-Pierre says it's down 90%, her math does not add up. But here's what the locals are saying. Even those who are Democrats, Republicans, unaffiliated, they are most outraged by what happens, which basically makes the visits of the administration a Potemkin village, which is where in Russia they would clean everything up right before a dignitary would come. So the world would think everything looks wonderful. When Joe Biden came, and I did a stand-up right where he was, right before he arrived, Border Patrol were called to El Paso to move out all of the illegal immigrants that were hundreds and hundreds just on the streets of El Paso. They didn't know why. Then first responders, police officers, and firefighters in El Paso were then tasked with scrubbing the streets of refuse, of human waste. And then they all learned that Joe Biden was arriving the next day. Not only did they scrub it and clean it up for him, but behind the wall, looking into Juarez, Mexico, there were hundreds of tents there. And somehow the Biden administration managed to coordinate with Mexico well enough to move all of those tents right before his visit. If they can do that, they can work on coordinating, keeping people on the Mexico side of the border. So that happened for Joe Biden's visit. For Kamala Harris's visit, for Secretary Mayorkas's visit. For Secretary Mayorkas's visit, they put the illegal immigrants on buses and just drove them around until he left. The people of El Paso were outraged because they were really hoping that the cameras, the media, and therefore the eyes of the world would finally see what they live with every single day. And instead, they got a sanitized, I don't even know how to put this, but a sanitized version of it. That's why we went down, to show the truth and to share the truth.
Yeah, it's not the truth, which is why we're doing things like this, because the truth has got to get out there. And maybe the people in El Paso know the truth, but we need the people in Broomfield to know the truth, and in Castle Rock to know the truth, and Franktown to know the truth. I mean, that's where we're kind of at here. We've got about 5 minutes left here. I'm wondering if you could, there's a political angle here too, because the congressional districts in and around the border have been blue for decades. Like, I think I'm spitballing 50, 60 years, but I think that they're saying at some point, this is ridiculous. There is this lawlessness. And I don't know what the calculus is of Mayorkas or Harris or Biden or their handlers. It does seem to me that they have a vested interest in seeing illegal immigration without any constraints, without any order. But I don't know that, I'm not persuaded that that's actually in their political best interest. It does seem like some of those border cities have turned red, which is interesting. I wonder if you could speak to that. And also, the Hispanic population shares conservative values. They're pro-family. They're pro-law and order. They know what lawlessness looks like. They don't want a part of it.
Yeah, without a doubt. You bring up a great point. There is a shift happening on our southern border politically because people are realizing and they're living it every day. And I always use this line from George Orwell's 1984, and I'm not going to quote it exactly, but it basically says we were told not to listen to the evidence of our eyes and our ears. It was the party's final, most essential command. Well, they've been told for decades and decades and decades that the Democrats are for them and there's nothing to see here. And as Mayorkas says, the border isn't open, wasn't open, never will be open, but they're living it every single day. And so this is a winning issue for us to talk about protecting those who are here legally. One of the things that some of the locals in El Paso said is, why do the drug cartels and illegal immigrants have more rights than I do when my family is from Mexico, but we came over legally and we are being victimized? This is something we need to talk about. And right here in Colorado and around the country, we need to reach out to the Hispanic community, because also what's happening, and I was speaking to a sheriff off the record the other day, they were talking about how some of the illegal immigrants who are coming up, not all of them, but some of them are coming up that are not being vetted, are felons and criminals and then go into these very Hispanic communities and terrorize the communities. People that are here want to be here. Many of them came through the legal process. And in addition, like you said, Stephen, the vast majority of the Hispanic community, by the way, just like the African immigrant community, like Ethiopians and Somalians, the vast majority of those communities share our value. They're here because they're pro-family. Many of them are people of deep faith, hardworking, wanting a better life. It's time we as conservatives and as members of the GOP begin to have those communications with them. They want safety for their families. They want jobs. They understand that even those that they care about on the south of the border are being used, abused, left in the desert to die, and being lied to about this, job plethora that they're being told that we have here. So we can win on this issue. We just have to be willing to speak courageously, compassionately, from an informed position. And that's why I appreciate this opportunity to talk about it and why we went down there in the first place.
I congratulate you. Thank you for your time. We want that in Douglas County. We want safe neighborhoods. We want good neighbors. I think it was Robert Frost, I could be wrong, that said fences make neighbors. And I that's what we all want. We want law and order. We want order to our immigration process, and we want to know who's coming and going from our country, just like we want to know who's coming and going from our house. It's not a free-for-all. It's not an open house. And I appreciate your report, and I'm looking forward to your 1 hour special. We're very excited about that. So thank you again.
Great.
Deb Flora, 710 KNUS, every day, 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for leadership of the Douglas County GOP. I am so blessed to live in Douglas County, and thank you everyone who's watching. We can win this battle together if we invite our neighbors to join us. Thank you.
Steve Peck here, your Douglas County Chair of the Republican Party. If you enjoyed this interview, I ask you to like, subscribe, comment, share this with your friends and neighbors. We've got to get the truth out there, and you're a part of that. If there's somebody that you'd like to hear from, please throw that suggestion in the comment section, and we'll be sure to reach out and speak to that person and address that topic. Thank you again.